At an elite garden party, where champagne flows and designer gowns shimmer, a wealthy socialite publicly humiliates a black server she assumes is hired help. Her hand connects with the woman's face before gasps fill the air. But when the CEO takes the microphone, one revelation shatters every assumption in the room and exposes a family secret buried for decades. The crack echoed like a gunshot across the manicured lawn. Champagne glasses froze mid-air. Conversations died. 200 guests turned as one toward the source of the sound, a sharp, vicious slap that hung in the afternoon air like poison. Maya Hayes stood perfectly still, her cheek blazing red. The woman in the ruby dress towered over her, diamonds glittering at her throat, hands still raised. Victoria Sterling's face was twisted with contempt, her voice dripping venom. "I said fetch me a clean glass. Are you deaf or just incompetent?" Maya's cream blouse caught the sunlight. Her dark skin showed the angry mark clearly. She didn't flinch, didn't speak. Around them, the garden party had transformed into a theater of frozen shock. Some guests looked away. Others leaned closer, phones already lifted. Near the marble fountain, a man in a cobalt blue suit stood motionless. David Thompson, CEO of Thompson Industries, watched with his jaw clenched tight. His hand gripped his glass so hard the stem nearly snapped. Victoria smoothed her hair, satisfied. "Know your place," she hissed at Maya. Then she turned to the nearest cluster of guests, laughing as if nothing had happened. Good help is impossible to find these days. Maya's eyes burned but remained dry. Her fists unclenched slowly. She'd promised herself she wouldn't run. Not this time. Not ever again. The silence stretched like a wire about to break. 6 hours earlier, Maya had stood at the iron gates of the Thompson estate, her car idling behind her. The mansion rose like a monument to old money. White columns, sprawling gardens, windows that caught morning light like jewels. She hadn't seen this place in 15 years. Not since the day she'd walked away and promised never to return. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. "You came." "Thank you." Maya Hayes was 34, an architect with her own firm in Chicago. She designed libraries and community centers, buildings meant to welcome rather than intimidate. Her work had been featured in magazines. She'd won awards. None of that mattered here. Here she was still Helen's daughter, the housekeeper's child, the secret that had lived in the margins. She drove through the gates. The memorial service for Helen Hayes had been small, private, held last week at a chapel downtown. This garden party was something else, a celebration of life, David had called it. Their mother had worked at this estate for 28 years. She'd raised David here in the shadows, while raising Maya in a small apartment across town. Maya parked near the guest house, away from the Bentleys and Teslas. She wore a simple cream blouse and tailored navy pants, elegant but understated. She'd learned long ago not to draw attention. As she walked toward the garden, she touched the envelope in her bag. Her mother's letter, the one that had arrived 3 weeks after the funeral, postmarked days before Helen died. "Come home," it read. "David needs to know everything. So do you." Maya had almost thrown it away. But Helen's words had always carried weight, even from beyond the grave. Especially from there. The garden was already filling with guests. Women in designer dresses, men in summer suits. Wait staff moved between them with trays of champagne and canapes. Maya recognized some faces from old photographs. Thompson family friends, business associates, society fixtures. No one recognized her. She was invisible here, just as she'd always been. Her mother had made sure of that, protecting her from a world that would never fully accept her. Maya felt the old ache return, the longing to belong mixed with the pride of having built her own life elsewhere. A server passed with a tray. Maya took a glass of water, not champagne. Then she saw David across the lawn greeting guests. He was tall, polished, every inch the successful executive. They shared a mother but not a world. He'd grown up in privilege, groomed for leadership. She'd grown up watching from outside. Their eyes met briefly. He nodded, subtle, not yet. They'd agreed to talk privately first before the truth came out, if it came out at all. Victoria Sterling descended on her like a hawk spotting prey. "You there?" The voice was sharp, imperious. Maya turned. The woman in the ruby dress stood 3 feet away, already annoyed. "I need a clean glass. This one has lipstick on the rim." Maya blinked. "I'm not—" "And bring more of those crab puffs." Victoria thrust her glass toward Maya. "The ones on the silver trays, not the cheap ones. Quickly." Around them, several guests glanced over. Maya felt their eyes cataloguing her. Simple clothes, brown skin, standing alone. The assumption was instant, reflexive. Of course she was staff. Maya's voice stayed calm. "I'm actually a guest here." Victoria's laugh was knife-sharp. "A guest? At the Thompson estate?" Her eyes raked over Maya with open disdain. "Darling, I've known this family for 20 years. Every guest here is personally known to David or his late father. You're clearly hired help. I'm not." Maya's jaw tightened. "If you need something, the actual servers are—" "Don't get smart with me." Victoria stepped closer, voice dropping to a vicious hiss. "I don't know what kind of delusions you have, but you don't belong here. Now take my glass before I report you to whoever hired you." Maya held her ground. "I'm not taking your glass." The words hung in the air. Victoria's face flushed deep red. Several guests had stopped talking now, openly watching. Maya felt the moment crystallize, the choice to back down or stand firm. She'd spent her whole life backing down. Victoria's hand flew before Maya could react. The slap connected with her left cheek, the crack echoing across the garden. Pain exploded bright and hot. Maya's head snapped sideways. Gasps erupted around them. Someone dropped a glass. Victoria stood breathing hard, her face contorted with rage. "And know your place," she spat. "This is what happens when people forget where they belong." Maya's cheek throbbed. Her ears rang. But she didn't move, didn't touch her face, didn't give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her break. Around them, the garden party had gone completely silent. 200 people watched and waited. Near the fountain, David Thompson started moving through the crowd. Maya stood frozen as the world tilted sideways. Her cheek burned where Victoria's hand had connected. The pain was sharp, immediate, but it was nothing compared to the humiliation spreading through her chest like spilled ink. Every eye in the garden was on her. Some showed shock. Others showed something worse. Satisfaction, as if the slap had confirmed what they'd already believed. She was an outsider, an intruder, someone who needed to be put in her place. Maya's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her thighs, forcing stillness. Inside, memories crashed over her in waves. Her mother's voice, "Hold your head up, baby. Dignity is something they can't take unless you give it away." The countless times Maya had stood silent, while teachers assumed she was on scholarship, while store clerks followed her down aisles, while colleagues mistook her for an assistant instead of the architect. She'd built a life away from this, a successful career, respect, autonomy. But here in this garden, wearing the wrong clothes and carrying the wrong name, she was reduced to nothing in seconds. The envelope in her bag seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Her mother's letter. The truth it contained. "You are more than they see," Helen had written. "You always were." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to shove Victoria backward, to walk away and never return. The urge to run was overwhelming, familiar, the same instinct that had driven her from this place 15 years ago. But her feet stayed planted, because Helen had asked her to come back, to face this world one more time, to stand beside David and claim what was rightfully hers, not money or status, but truth, family, the right to exist without apology. Maya lifted her chin slowly. Her cheek still throbbed, but her eyes were clear. Victoria was smoothing her dress, already turning away, already dismissing Maya as handled. The guests were starting to murmur again, conversations resuming, the moment passing. Not yet, Maya thought. Not this time. She reached into her bag and touched the envelope. Across the garden, David was moving closer, his face tight with something Maya couldn't quite read. Fury, grief, determination. Their eyes met. He knew. He'd seen everything. The truth was about to break open, and nothing would ever be the same. 26 years ago, Helen Hayes had stood in this same garden, wearing a different uniform. She was 28 then, newly hired as a housekeeper for the Thompson family. Beautiful, quiet, and desperately in need of work. She had a 4-year-old daughter, Maya, and no husband. The job at the estate paid enough to cover rent and childcare. She took it without hesitation. Robert Thompson was 42, recently widowed, raising his business empire and his grief in equal measure. He noticed Helen immediately. Not just her work, but her grace. The way she moved through rooms like water, efficient and calm. They fell in love slowly, secretly. For 3 years it remained hidden. Then Helen became pregnant. Robert promised to leave his world behind, to start fresh with her and the children. But his family had other plans. His late wife's relatives threatened lawsuits, disinheritance, scandal. Robert was a coward when it mattered most. He stayed in his world. Helen stayed in the shadows. David was born in a private clinic, registered under Helen's name only. Robert provided money, set up trust funds, but demanded secrecy. Helen agreed because she loved him, and because she believed he'd eventually choose them. He never did. Maya grew up knowing she had a brother she couldn't claim. She'd visit the estate occasionally, playing quietly in the gardens while her mother worked. She'd see David, golden-haired, confident, surrounded by tutors and toys, and feel the distance between them like an ocean. Helen taught her resilience. We don't have their money, baby, but we have something better. We have each other and we have our dignity. No one can take that unless you let them. Maya learned to move through the world with her head up, even when doors closed in her face. She excelled in school, earned scholarships, studied architecture. She built her life brick by brick, proving she needed nothing from the Thompson family, but she'd always wondered what it would be like to be acknowledged. To have David call her sister in public, to stand in that garden not as the housekeeper's daughter, but as someone who belonged. Helen died 6 months ago. Breast cancer, swift and brutal. In her final weeks, she'd called David to her bedside and told him everything. About Maya, about Robert's cowardice, about the years of silence and secrets. David had wept. Then he'd found Maya's number and called her. I didn't know, he'd said, his voice breaking. I swear I didn't know. Maya had believed him. Anger was easier when directed at dead men and old lies. David was just another casualty of Robert's choices. Helen's letter arrived 3 weeks later. Come to the memorial, she'd written. Stand with your brother. Let the truth out. It's time. Maya had resisted. But here she was, cheek still burning from Victoria's slap, standing on the edge of everything. Helen's voice echoed in her mind, dignity. Always. Maya squared her shoulders and waited for David to reach her. David stopped 3 feet away from Maya, his face carved from stone. Victoria was still laughing with her circle of friends, oblivious. The crowd's attention had started to drift. The moment was slipping away, becoming just another uncomfortable incident people would gossip about later and forget by tomorrow. Maya pulled the envelope from her bag. Her hands didn't shake. She wanted you to have this. David took it carefully, like it might shatter. Inside was Helen's letter, written in her careful script. A photograph, young Helen and Robert sitting together in this very garden, his hand on her pregnant belly. And a legal document, notarized and official. Robert Thompson's acknowledgement of paternity, signed 3 days before he died of a heart attack 2 years ago. David's breath caught. He signed it? Mom found it in his desk after he died. Maya's voice was low, meant only for him. His lawyer had it notarized but never filed it. I think he was afraid. Even at the end, David stared at the document. His father's signature was unmistakable. Below it, Helen's name, and below that David Robert Thompson's son. Maya Christine Hayes, acknowledged family. He knew about you all along, David whispered. Before I was born, he knew. He knew. Maya's voice was steady despite the tremor in her chest. And he chose silence. Every single day he chose it. Around them the party continued. Champagne flowed. People laughed. Victoria's voice rose above the others, sharp and dismissive, still making jokes about inappropriate guests to her friends. David's jaw clenched. He looked at Maya, really looked at her, at the red mark on her cheek. At the way she held herself with quiet strength despite everything. At the sister he'd been denied his entire life. "I'm sorry," he said, "for all of it. For him, for them, for not knowing sooner." Maya nodded. "You know now. She hit you." David's voice dropped, fury bleeding through. "Victoria struck you because she assumed you were a servant. Because of your skin. Because of everything this family has always been." "Yes." Maya met his eyes, "and every person here saw it happen and did nothing. That's who they are. Who we've always been to them." David's hand tightened on the envelope. He looked across the garden at Victoria, at the guests, at the gleaming estate that represented everything his father had valued more than truth, more than love, more than his own children. Something shifted in his expression. Grief hardened into resolve. "Not anymore," he said quietly. Then louder, "Not anymore." He turned and walked toward the raised platform where the microphone stood, used earlier for memorial speeches. Maya's heart hammered. She wanted to call him back, to stop whatever was about to happen. The familiar instinct to hide, to protect herself, rose like a wave, but she didn't move. David stepped onto the platform and lifted the microphone. The crowd quieted gradually, faces turning toward him with polite curiosity. Victoria looked up, smiled, expecting some gracious closing remarks. David's voice cut through the garden like a blade. "I need to tell you all something about my family. About lies we've been living for 30 years. And about the woman who was just assaulted in front of you." The garden went silent. Maya felt every eye turn toward her. Her cheek still throbbed. Her heart raced, but she held David's gaze across the distance and nodded once. The truth was coming. Finally, David's voice carried across the garden with absolute clarity. "Victoria, Sterling just struck a woman she assumed was hired help. She made that assumption based on appearance, on prejudice, on the belief that certain people don't belong in places like this." Victoria's smile vanished. She stepped forward, hand raised. "David, darling, let's not make a scene over a simple misunderstanding." It wasn't a misunderstanding. David's tone was ice. "You saw a black woman standing alone and immediately decided she was a servant. You gave her orders. When she refused, you hit her. 200 people witnessed it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked uncomfortable. Others watched with hungry curiosity. Victoria's face flushed red, but she maintained her composure. "I apologize if I was mistaken about her role, but there's no need to—" "Her role?" David's laugh was bitter. "Her role in this family, you mean?" Victoria froze. Her husband moved closer, whispering urgently in her ear. She shook him off, eyes narrowing at David. "What are you talking about?" Maya stood perfectly still. This was the moment. The precipice. David could step back now, smooth things over, keep the peace. He'd always been good at that, navigating between worlds, maintaining appearances. She'd understand if he chose that path, but David's gaze found hers across the lawn, and something passed between them, a silent agreement. A shared understanding that some truths were worth the cost. He held up the photograph. "This is my mother, Helen Hayes, and my father, Robert Thompson. 30 years ago in this garden." The crowd leaned closer. Several people pulled out phones, zooming in on the image projected on David's tablet, now displayed on the garden's event screen. Helen, young and radiant. Robert, his hand protective on her belly. Victoria's face went pale. "That's impossible." "Your mother was Margaret." Margaret was my father's first wife. She died when I was an infant. Helen Hayes raised me. She worked here as a housekeeper, yes, but she was also the woman my father loved. The woman who bore his child, gasps erupted. Phones lifted. The crowd shifted like a single organism, pressed by the weight of revelation. Victoria's voice shook. So you're saying that woman, she pointed at Maya, is what exactly? David's voice softened but held steel underneath. That woman is Maya Hayes, my sister. The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. The garden exploded into chaos. Voices rose in shocked exclamations. Guests turned to each other, phones already typing, capturing, sharing. The perfect facade of the Thompson estate party shattered like dropped crystal. Victoria stumbled backward, her face cycling through shock, disbelief, and fury. That's impossible. Robert would never, he couldn't have. He did. David's voice cut through the noise. For 30 years he hid the truth. He supported us financially but demanded silence. He was a coward who chose reputation over family. Maya felt the weight of 200 stares, some sympathetic, many calculating, a few openly hostile. She wanted to disappear, to let David handle this alone. But Helen's voice whispered in her memory, "Stand tall, baby. You belong." Victoria found her footing, rage replacing shock. "This is slander. You have no proof." David held up the legal document. Robert Thompson's acknowledgement of paternity. Signed, notarized, dated 2 years ago. 3 days before he died. He knew the truth was coming eventually. He just wasn't brave enough to release it himself. The crowd pressed closer. An older woman gasped. Robert's sister, Patricia. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Helen told me," she whispered, loud enough to carry. "Years ago. She told me, and I didn't believe her. I thought she was—" She couldn't finish. Shame colored her cheeks. Victoria's voice rose, desperate and vicious. "So what? So she was his mistress? That doesn't make her—" She jabbed a finger toward Maya. "Family. It makes her the bastard daughter of a housekeeper who seduced a grieving widower." The word hung in the air like poison. Maya's vision narrowed. The slap had been physical. This was something deeper. The dismissal of her mother's love, her own existence reduced to scandal and shame. She stepped forward before David could respond. Her voice was quiet but carried across the sudden silence. "My mother loved him. He loved her. You can call me whatever you want, Victoria. But Helen Hayes raised David with more love and integrity than this family ever showed. And she raised me to know my worth regardless of what people like you think." Victoria's face twisted. "You have no right to be here. No right to this name, this family, this life. You're nothing but enough." David's voice cracked like a whip. He descended from the platform, crossing the lawn to stand beside Maya, shoulder to shoulder, united. "Maya is my sister. She's a renowned architect with her own firm. She's accomplished more through her own merit than most people in this garden ever will. And today she was assaulted because someone assumed her worth based on her appearance." He turned to face the crowd fully. "This family has built its legacy on secrets and silence, on hiding uncomfortable truths. That ends today. Right now." Patricia stepped forward, tears streaming. "I'm sorry," she said, voice breaking. "Helen, I'm so sorry. I should have—" She looked at Maya. "You have your mother's eyes." Maya's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. Victoria was shaking, cornered and desperate. Her husband touched her arm, whispering urgently. She shook him off violently. "This is a circus. A publicity stunt. I won't be part of—" "Then leave." David's words were final. "You assaulted my sister, in front of witnesses. If you're wise, you'll leave now before I decide to press charges." Victoria's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in her life, she had no response. The power she'd wielded so casually, the assumption that her position made her untouchable, had evaporated. She looked at Maya one last time. Hatred burned in her eyes, but underneath it was something else. Fear. the realization that the world was shifting beneath her feet. Without another word, Victoria turned and stalked toward the house. Her husband followed, face drawn. Several guests parted to let them through, then watched them go with expressions ranging from satisfaction to discomfort. Maya's legs trembled. The adrenaline that had kept her standing was beginning to fade. David's hand found her elbow, steadying her. "You okay?" he whispered. She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. The crowd still watched. Phones still recorded. The truth was out, but Maya had no idea what came next. The garden emptied in waves. Some guests approached Maya with awkward apologies and curiosity disguised as concern. Others left quickly, avoiding eye contact, already crafting the stories they'd tell at their next dinner party. The Thompson estate scandal would fuel society gossip for months. Maya felt hollowed out. The confrontation had drained something essential from her, leaving her shaky and raw. David was pulled away by his assistant, dealing with urgent calls and damage control. Patricia lingered nearby, tearful and apologetic, but Maya couldn't bear her guilt right now. She slipped away to the far edge of the garden, where Helen's rose bushes bloomed in careful rows. Her mother had planted them 15 years ago. Deep burgundy blooms, the color of old wine and dignity. Helen had tended them every week, even after David took over the estate management and offered to hire gardeners. "These are mine," she'd said, "my little piece of beauty in someone else's world." Maya knelt beside the nearest bush, touching a petal, soft and fragile. Like everything Helen had protected, her children, her love, her truth, the silence pressed in. Maya's cheek still throbbed where Victoria had struck her. The mark would fade, but the moment would replay forever. The assumption, the contempt, the hand rising and falling. Know your place. Maya had spent her entire life trying to prove she had a place. Top grades, scholarships, architecture degree, her own firm, awards and recognition. None of it mattered in that garden. One woman had looked at her and seen only what she expected to see. Tears finally came, hot and bitter. She'd thought exposing the truth would feel liberating. Instead, she felt exposed, vulnerable, like she'd ripped open old wounds without knowing how to stitch them closed. David had claimed her publicly, yes, but what now? Did she want to be part of this world? These people? A memory surfaced. Age 7, watching David's birthday party from the kitchen window. Dozens of children laughing, playing, eating cake. Helen had held Maya close and whispered, "You're better off here with me, baby. That world out there isn't kind to girls like us." Maya had resented those words for years. Now she understood them. Her phone buzzed. Messages flooding in from friends who'd seen the video, already going viral. "Is that you? Are you okay?" "Oh my God, Maya." She silenced it. The rose petal crumbled between her fingers. She thought about leaving, driving back to Chicago, returning to her life where she controlled the narrative, where her worth wasn't determined by old men's secrets and rich women's prejudices. But Helen's voice whispered again, "Dignity, always." "Stand tall." Maya wiped her eyes, stood slowly. Her legs were steadier now. She'd come here because her mother asked her to, because David deserved to know his sister, because truth mattered more than comfort. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. David found her as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. He looked exhausted. His cobalt suit was rumpled, tie loosened. "I've been looking everywhere for you." Maya gestured at the roses. "Mum's spot." David knelt beside her, touching the same bush. She loved these. Spent hours out here talking to them like they could hear her. His voice cracked. "I miss her." "Me too." They sat in silence for a moment. Then David pulled out his phone. "I want to show you something. Mom recorded this 2 weeks before she died. She made me promise to show you if you ever came back." He pressed play. Helen's face appeared on the screen, gaunt from illness, but eyes bright with fierce determination. She sat in her small apartment, sunlight streaming through the window behind her. Maya, baby, if you're watching this, it means you found your way home. Helen's voice was weak but steady. I know you're angry. At me for keeping secrets. At Robert for being a coward. At the world for making you fight so hard just to exist. Maya's throat closed. But I need you to understand something. Helen leaned closer to the camera. I kept you separate from that world because I wanted to protect you. I didn't want you to grow up in the margins, always wondering if you were enough. I wanted you to build your own foundation, your own worth, independent of the Thompson name. Helen paused, gathering strength. But David deserves to know his sister. You deserve to know your brother, and this family deserves to face the truth about Robert's choices. I'm asking you to be braver than me, baby. Braver than him. Stand with David. Let the light in. Don't let shame and silence win. The video ended. Maya couldn't speak. David's eyes were wet. She was right, he said quietly. About everything. About Dad's cowardice. About the family's silence. About you. I don't know if I can do this. Maya's voice broke. Be part of this world. These people. Then don't. David's response surprised her. Don't be part of their world. Build your own, but let me be part of yours. Let me know my sister. Let me try to fix what Dad broke. Maya looked at him. Really looked. Same eyes as Helen. Same quiet strength underneath the polished exterior. Victoria will press back, Maya said. She'll twist this into something ugly. She has lawyers' connection, or so do I. David's jaw set. And I have something she doesn't. The truth. Legal documentation. And a public that's already seen the video of her assaulting you. Her reputation is finished. He pulled out another document. There's more. I've been planning this for months, since Mom told me everything. A foundation in Helen's name. Supporting domestic workers. Providing education and legal aid for women who've been silenced or exploited. I want you to help me run it. Maya stared at the papers. Helen Hayes Foundation. The mission statement was written in David's handwriting. Dignity, justice, and truth for those who built their lives in the margins. You did this? Her voice was barely a whisper. Mom deserves a legacy beyond whispers and scandal, and I want to use our family's resources for something that actually matters. David met her eyes. Will you help me? Maya thought of her mother's hands, worn and strong. Of the roses she'd planted in someone else's garden. Of the truth she'd carried alone for so many years. Yes, Maya said. Yes, I will. David smiled, real and unguarded. For the first time, Maya saw her brother clearly. Not the CEO, not Robert's heir. Just David. Family. There's one more thing we need to do, David said. Together. They returned to the garden as twilight painted the sky deep purple and gold. About 50 guests remained, lingering in small clusters. Victoria was gone, but her allies remained. Wealthy women who'd built their social power on the same assumptions and prejudices. They watched Maya and David approach with guarded expressions. David had insisted on this. We can't just let people leave with questions and half-truths. We need to control the narrative completely. He'd set up the large screen again, positioned speakers. Word spread quickly through the remaining guests. Phones lifted. Maya's heart hammered, but she stood beside David, shoulder to shoulder. David's voice rang out, clear and firm. Thank you for staying. I know today has been shocking, but there are some things you need to understand about my family, about Helen Hayes, and about the woman who raised me. He gestured to the screen. A slideshow began. Photos of Helen and Robert spanning decades. Young Helen, radiant and hopeful. Robert, smiling in ways David had never seen in public photographs. Images of baby David in Helen's arms. Later David as a child. Helen always nearby but never front and center. My father loved Helen Hayes, David said. But he was too weak to claim that love publicly. He chose reputation over integrity. He paid money instead of offering partnership. He gave me every advantage, education, opportunities, this estate, but denied me the truth about my family. A photo appeared, young Maya, maybe 6 years old, standing in this very garden beside Helen. The resemblance was unmistakable now. Same eyes, same determined chin. Maya Hayes is my sister. My father acknowledged her existence in legal documents, but never publicly. Why? Because he was afraid of judgment, of losing status, of what people would say. David's voice hardened. Today, Victoria Sterling looked at my sister and saw only what her prejudices allowed her to see. She made assumptions based on race and appearance. When Maya refused to play the role Victoria assigned her, she was struck, assaulted in front of all of you. Uncomfortable shifting rippled through the remaining guests. Some of you looked away. Some were uncomfortable. But how many of you were truly surprised? David let the question hang. How many of you have made similar assumptions in your own lives? Assigned roles to people based on how they look? On what you expect them to be? Silence. Heavy and damning, Patricia stepped forward, her face streaked with tears. I knew, she said, voice breaking. Helen told me the truth 20 years ago. About David, about Robert, about Maya, and I did nothing. I convinced myself she was lying, exaggerating, trying to trap my brother. I was wrong. I'm ashamed. Her confession opened something. Another woman spoke up, an older society matriarch. I saw Helen with Robert once. At a restaurant across town. They looked happy, in love. I told myself I'd misunderstood, that it couldn't be what it looked like. More voices joined. Admissions of willful blindness, of choosing comfort over truth. I have seen Helen for years and never truly seeing her at all. Maya listened, feeling something loosen in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. These people weren't monsters. They were cowards, and cowardice could be confronted. David pressed a button. Helen's final video played again, her voice filling the garden. My children deserve better than shame and silence. Maya, David, you are both more than this family's secrets. Build something beautiful together. Show them what real legacy looks like. When the video ended, the garden was absolutely silent. David turned to Maya. My sister is one of the most accomplished architects in Chicago. She's designed community centers and libraries that serve thousands. She's built a life of meaning and integrity. None of you knew her name until today because our father decided her existence was shameful. He looked out at the crowd. This is your choice now. You can cling to old prejudices and comfortable lies, or you can choose truth. Uncomfortable, messy, real truth. Maya found her voice. I don't need your approval. I never did. I built my life without this family's name or money. But I'm here because my mother asked me to be, because truth matters. Because David deserves to know his family, and because people like Victoria Sterling shouldn't get to decide who belongs and who doesn't, based on a glance. She paused, then added quietly, Helen Hayes worked in this house for 28 years. She raised a son who became a CEO. She loved a man who was too afraid to love her back openly, and she taught me that dignity isn't something anyone can give you or take away. It's something you carry inside, unshakable. Patricia approached slowly. May I? She reached out, hesitant. Maya nodded. Patricia embraced her, whispering apologies over and over. Then, one by one, other guests approached. Some apologized. Others simply acknowledged her. A few left without a word, unable or unwilling to reckon with their own complicity. But something had shifted. The truth was out, unvarnished and complete. The last guests departed as stars began to appear overhead. David and Maya sat together on the stone bench near Helen's roses, exhausted but strangely peaceful. The garden felt different now, less like a monument to exclusion, and more like the space it could become, open, honest, transformed. Think the foundation will make a difference? Maya asked quietly. I don't know. David's honesty was refreshing, but Mom would want us to try. And even if we help one person feel less invisible, that's something. Patricia approached hesitantly, carrying 2 cups of tea. May I join you? Maya nodded. Patricia sat carefully, hands wrapped around her own cup. I called my lawyer. I'm donating to the foundation. A substantial amount. It won't make up for my silence, but it's a start, David said gently. They sat in silence for a while. Then Patricia spoke again. Helen used to bring you here, Maya, when you were little. You'd play by these roses while she worked. I saw you once. You were maybe 5, making up stories about the flowers being castle towers. She smiled sadly. I didn't know who you were, but I should have. I should have looked closer. Maya's throat tightened. I remember those stories. Your mother was remarkable. Patricia's voice cracked. She loved you both so fiercely. And we failed her. All of us. Yes, Maya said simply. You did. Patricia nodded, accepting the truth. I'd like to try to do better. If you'll let me. Maya looked at David. He nodded slightly. We'll see, Maya said. Actions matter more than words. Understood. Patricia finished her tea and stood. I'll start with the foundation. And Maya, I'm glad you're here. Robert would have been proud, if he'd been brave enough to admit it. She left them alone again. David turned to Maya. Are you going back to Chicago? Eventually. My firm needs me, but I'll come back for foundation meetings, for... She gestured at the space between them. For this. For us? I'd like that, David smiled. Ellen would too. Maya touched the rosebush one more time. The petals glowed dark red in the fading light. She planted these to leave her mark. Something beautiful in a world that tried to make her invisible. We'll make sure everyone knows they're hers, David promised. A plaque. Her name, her dates, her story. Not her full stories, Maya's voice was firm. Not the affair or the scandal. Just this Helen Hayes, devoted mother. Tender of beauty. Woman of strength. Perfect, David agreed. They sat together as night fell completely, the garden transforming in darkness. Above them windows glowed from the estate. No longer a monument to secrets, but just a building. Stone and glass and history waiting to be remade. Maya felt the weight lift slightly. Not gone, but bearable. She'd come here expecting anger and confrontation. Instead, she'd found her brother. A beginning, fragile and real. Helen's voice whispered one last time in her memory. Stand tall, baby. You belong. Finally, Maya believed it. Maya stood alone in the garden one last time before leaving. Dawn was still an hour away. The roses were dark silhouettes against a purple sky. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying everything. The slap, the truth, Victoria's face, David's voice, Helen's video. She thought about her mother's hands, worn from years of work, gentle when they touched Maya's face, strong when they held her steady. Helen had lived caught between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. But she'd carved out her own space anyway. The roses, her children. Her quiet dignity. Assumptions had caged Helen, made her invisible in plain sight. A housekeeper, a mistress, a secret, never the architect of her own story. Maya had almost let those same assumptions define her yesterday. The moment Victoria struck her, she'd felt that old familiar shame. The sense that maybe she really didn't belong. Maybe her clothes were wrong, her presence an intrusion, her existence an inconvenience. But Helen had taught her better. Dignity wasn't something granted by others. It wasn't a gift from wealthy families or society's approval. It was internal, unshakable, built from knowing your own worth regardless of who refused to see it. Victoria would recover. Women like her always did, insulated by money and connections. But the video would follow her. The truth would follow her. And maybe, just maybe, she'd hesitate the next time she looked at someone and made assumptions about who they were. Or maybe she wouldn't. People rarely changed without wanting to. But David had changed. Patricia had changed. And the foundation would help others who'd lived in margins and shadows, carrying their worth silently, while the world looked past them. Maya touched the rose one last time. The petal was cool with morning dew, fragile but resilient. Beautiful because of its strength, not despite it. She heard footsteps. David appeared, carrying 2 travel mugs of coffee. Thought you might be out here, saying goodbye to Mom. She's not in the garden. David smiled gently. She's in us. What we do next. Maya accepted the coffee. They stood together, watching the sky lighten from purple to pink to gold. Somewhere in the house, preparations were beginning for a different kind of day. No more parties. No more secrets, just truth, and the hard work of building something better. Ready? David asked. Maya nodded. Ready. They walked back toward the house together, siblings at last, carrying Helen's legacy forward into the light. Behind them, the roses stood tall in the garden, waiting for the sun.